Is now going to demo zabbix on a whiteboard. He's that talented.
Yes. Quite fun.
The whiteboard, the first wiki.
Exactly. But the history function sucks.
Yeah. Unless you have a really bad eraser, and then you can sort of see ghosted on there.
Okay. Now that we're actually working and we got a pin, I'm Andrew, one of the members of fosug here. I'm going to be demonstrating and going over a product called zabbix. Zabbix is an open source network and service monitoring system. If you're familiar with Nagios, Nagios has kind of been the de facto standard for open source network and system monitoring. Originally I got turned on to having to do this. We had a server that actually failed. It had been set up about 6 years ago. No backups, of course, and the sole purpose of this machine was to monitor all of our other servers and let us know if we had a problem. Unfortunately, this server had failed at some point in time, and nobody knew that it had failed because it wasn't monitoring itself and couldn't send out an alert. We got some phone calls from clients who were very unhappy that suddenly all of their services, their web page, their email was no longer accessible. We check it out. Yes, one of the clusters went down. Why didn't we get a notification? Well, our old monitoring system had gone down and nobody knew it. Well, it was originally set up using Nagios 1.0. If anybody has ever used Nagios, Nagios is extremely difficult to set up. Everything has to be done through text configuration files. Not fun to go in and make changes. If you're going to be setting up a whole lot of clients, it's a long time to set up. Well, Nagios has been upgraded. It's now into version 3, and I've been told it's a lot better. It did not have quite what I wanted. I wanted something that could keep a long history of a client's uptime and their services, statistics, and I needed it to alert me if something went down or was out of range. So if a website or a server was slow to respond or went offline, I'd want to get a notification. I wanted to be able to generate reports so we could give the client, okay, look, here's your equipment. You've got 20% downtime over the month. We need to get something looked at. Here's the information that says, yes, you do have a problem, so you're willing to pay us to fix it. So I started looking around at Nagios, and I found a project called, if anybody knows, I'm a big fan of Splunk. It's a system that monitors log files, and you can run just massive reports on any kind of information you throw at it. And I found this project called, it was a Nagios and Splunk integration. So Nagios is doing all the monitoring, sending all of its information to Splunk, and Splunk goes ahead and generates the report. 6 weeks after trying to get this to work, I was fed up and I could not get this project to work. Nothing worked the way it said it would on the web. It was just a disaster. I ended up talking to a guy, and he said, why are you reinventing the wheel? Like, what do you mean? It's like, well, there's already an open source product out there that does exactly what you're asking for. It's called zabbix. So I looked into it, and it looked pretty nice. In a period of about 6 hours, I had zabbix up and running, monitoring our internal network. Very simple, not doing anything fancy, just, is the server on? Is it doing its job? If it doesn't do its job, send me a text message. Wasn't doing reporting, or there was no intelligence in it yet, but in a period of 6 hours, I had that system up and running versus 6 weeks with the other project, which I had gone nowhere. So zabbix actually consists of a couple different aspects. You have the zabbix server, which is a standalone. It runs on a Linux box, and it only will run on a Linux box, and they're very, very adamant about this. They tried porting it over to Windows, and they cannot get the performance out of it yet. Who knows if they'll report it over. But so right now, the server has to be a Linux machine. Your flavor doesn't really matter. And what it does is it actively, it does everything you want it to do. It can check your clients, receive information from clients, gathers everything into a SQL database. You do have your SQL database, which can sit on the same server. It could be on another server. The version of SQL that you use really doesn't matter. You can use Oracle, you can use MySQL, you can use Microsoft SQL. But you do have to have a high-performance database because once you get quite a few clients that the system is monitoring, it hits this database pretty hard, updating information. It's not necessarily a large database, but the records are continuously changing. Other aspect we have here is we have our front end, or our GUI. Right now it's a web-based GUI. They are working on standalone GUIs for the individual machines, and also a command line GUI. Interestingly, this program does not have a command line GUI yet. You'd think it would start off with that. But the GUI can be on the same machine as the server, or you can put it on another machine. It doesn't care as long as it runs PHP. Over here we have all of our clients. These are our client servers. So we have client 1, client 2, and client 3. There's multiple ways that we can get the information from these. We can do a active, a passive test, which basically means the server goes out here and says, can I connect to www? Yes or no. If it's yes, it goes on to its next test. This one here would go ahead as your mail up. And then the third client, actually we can put an active agent on here. And it will give us a lot of information about the client. So if we want to know how much hard drive space is available on it, how much memory is available, the processor load, if it's running SQL Server or Exchange or a whole list of other supported applications, it can send that information actually over here to the server, and we can put a whole bunch of rule sets here and determine, okay, if the SQL server on this one is at 80% utilization for more than 5 minutes, send me an alert. If the Exchange system right here has a database greater than 73 gigabytes, Exchange is going to crash, but send an alert. But we can set all kinds of different variables in this particular server. One other thing that it has, now if we want to monitor an entire company, for instance, which has 5 or 6 servers by themselves, 50 workstations, and we want to register all that information, we can actually use a zabbix proxy out here at the client site, and all of their servers and their workstations will all report directly to this proxy. And this proxy will actually be given a copy of the rule set over here, and there's 2 ways that this can be done. One, we can have this proxy continuously just be barfing information over to the server, continuously updating the server, which, if you have a nice fat pipeline on both ends, that could work. But because this has the rule set and the server knows, basically these two will just talk back and forth and say, are you doing your job? Yes, no, yes, no. Just make sure that it hasn't lost its connection. But the proxy will not send an alert or updated information to the server until something is outside those rule sets. So if all day long everything is perfectly fine and the mail server goes down, at this point the proxy is going to send a mail server down to the server, and the server can do whatever it's been told to do. It keeps the bandwidth down, we don't have unnecessary chatter going across a WAN, and the server will assume that everything is okay unless it hears otherwise, or the proxy disappears. If the proxy disappears, the server will notify you, hey, I lost my proxy. So this network over here, something might be wrong with it, but I don't know. But it is quite, it can get very daunting, and although it only took me a few hours to actually set this up initially, I did take the next 3 weeks figuring out how to handle everything within zabbix, because with Nagios, basically it was either something was up or something was down, or it was outside of the range which you wanted it to be. You didn't have a whole lot of granular control, at least with version 1. Version 3 might have upgraded and changed that. But there was so much that I could do in zabbix, or you guys can do in zabbix, that you will need to spend a couple weeks just learning how to handle it. Now, any questions right off the bat?
Proxy server, does it just talk over a standard TCP port?
Standard TCP port, yeah, which is user-defined, and it can be encrypted using different types of encryption modules and plugins. So you can, there's even what they call a stupid plugin, which if you're just using it for testing, you can throw everything out in plain text, which really isn't smart. You don't want all your network information and status going across a wide area network. It's plain text.
Some of these other monitoring tools are based around RRD. They roll around after a while. Do you the same thing have to do with your SQL database, or do you just fill up the ball?
No, they actually have what they call housekeeping. You can set you can either set for overall or each individual host that you set up a maximum number to keep. Right now, by default out of the box, it keeps everything for 1 year, 365 days. Now, if you're running, we've been running now for about 2 months, 185 clients, roughly between 5 and 10 services for clients, and our SQL database is about 7 gigabytes, so it is a fairly large database. Right now, depending on the clients, each service will be hit every 120 seconds. Certain services are hit every 60 seconds. And then if we're doing a stability test on a server, it is actually hit every 10 seconds if we're actually trying to find a problem with one of their connections. So that can add a lot of data to your database real quick. And you can manually go in and purge the information if you want for individual clients, or just say, I only want to keep the last 3 months of everything and dump everything else. And that's actually built into the GUI.
Can you tune the scale and the retention times for all of that in the GUI, or is that something that's custom?
Everything, 100. Once you do the initial install, 100% of everything is done through the GUI. There's no command line or configuration files to modify those. Currently, the entire configuration is actually stored in the SQL database. So you have a configuration file that has like your host name, IPs that it allows in, but all of the configuration files, or configurations for all the hosts that you're monitoring and the servers that you're monitoring, that's all stored in the SQL database, and it's all through the GUI, which I'll show you.
What databases can it work with? MS SQL,
It'll
MySQL,
work with,
Postgres?
Oracle, Microsoft SQL, MySQL, and it will work with SQLite, but SQLite, you're capped at, I believe, about 50 simultaneously hosts for monitoring, because the database can't keep up with the updates.
What architectures can the active client have? Or can you monitor?
The active monitoring has open source. Everything is open source. It's a completely open source project. It has every version of Linux, anything based on a 2.4 or 2.6 kernel, NetWare 5.0 through current, Windows, every version of Windows, plus it has individual agents for Microsoft SQL, Exchange, Oracle, and a whole slew of other individual applications which can be put on there to monitor individual things. What else do they have? Plus, it is SMNP compliant, so there's templates for just hundreds of devices out there for switches, firewalls, which people have created templates for. So if you have a 3-com managed switch and you enable that, throw all your logs out there. If one of your ports goes bad, it'll let you know that you have a port bad. It has templates for a whole bunch of printers, so if you want to get down to there, have a text message sent to your phone when one of your administrator printers runs out of toner, you can do that as well. It also has something which they call a zabbix sender, which is a agent which will send any information into the database that you want to. This is a command line utility, so you can write, and they have this for both Windows and for Linux, so you can write your utilities in Windows or Linux. Plus, if you have PHP experience, you can roll your own. So right now I'm using that sender for a particular item we have. We have a temperature monitoring device in the server room, and it has no real way for it to send information over. Basically, you just telnet into it. It spits out all the values of the thermometers. So I just have a little bash script that goes in there, parses that, and then uses the zabbix sender to send that information into the database. So go ahead and fire this up here. That's it.
Hey, Drew.
Yeah.
Is it kind of like Splunk where you get up to, what is it, like 200 megs of, or
No.
gigs of data, so it's not time bombed or anything?
It's not time bombed. There is the only thing that's going to happen is if you call them up. It is a commercial. It is commercially funded and supported by the company. They actually sell a zabbix appliance that works right out of the box. You go in and set it up. They actually also do hosting. So if you don't want to set up any of the hardware and you are just monitoring all your devices remotely, you put a proxy on yours, you pay them a monthly fee, and you tell them who you want to alert it if something goes wrong. They take care of all that for a price, of course. If you have problems setting it up, they will be glad to help you if you have a good credit card. But the forums and the community is excellent. So I found quite a few solutions to my problems just talking to the community. So, let's make sure I'm out of the way here. Installation is a little daunting if you're not used to working in the command line. The documentation, however, is excellent. You can copy and paste from the documentation to do the entire installation. It will take you a while because there's a lot of individual options. But I'm not going to go through an actual install right now because nobody brought their sleeping bags. But what we basically do is we have the project right here. This is the newest version. I went ahead and downloaded it. We just run a configure and we compile it. There are no pre-rolled binaries for this project. The project maintainers are very explicit about that. When people ask, why are we going to get binaries for this? They flat out say, no binaries. You roll it yourself. So you will go ahead and you will compile it. You'll end up compiling a couple modules. You'll compile a server module, which again has to run on a Linux system, and you just set it to run up in your startup scripts, so it runs in the background. There are also agent modules that you can that are compiled at the same time, and then you can copy those onto your individual machines and add them into a service, so it starts up on the machine boots. The front end is horribly complex to install. You simply have to change into the front end directory and copy this into your web server. That's it. It's an entire PHP front end, and all you do is you copy it in there. And I believe there's a single configuration file in here that we have to tell it where the actual server is located, plus username and password for the database. So what we end up with is I feel more comfortable in Firefox. Explorer is bad enough I'm on Windows right now. And I need to learn how to type. Here's the front end. Right off the bat, we have to set up a user account to log in. And we have a couple options here. We have monitoring, inventory, reports, configuration, and administration. Administration, actually, now that I think about it, this is actually where we set up the database username and password. We go through there's actually a wizard that you'll go through, and it'll actually have you log in. It'll have you change some permissions to the files so you can make changes to them. After it's dumped the information to the configuration file, it'll have you go back in and change the permissions back. The front end will not run if the permissions are not correct. It will prevent it from running, so you don't end up with an insecure installation. It will also not let you run any of the services or the agents as root. Flat out tells you, hey moron, don't do this, it's stupid. I'm not going to even tell you that it's stupid unless you run it, I'm just going to not let you run it. But we can set up individual users, so if we have clients, we want our clients to be able to go in and look at different aspects of the system. We can set up a user for a particular company, and they can only view reports and information regarding their company. But right off the bat here, we'll go to the dashboard. Dashboard gives you an overview of everything that the system has. It takes a second to generate. This machine, just so you know, this is a machine that ended up being, it was a test system that it entered into a production environment. I am going to be moving this over to a PowerEdge server as soon as I get it. But right now this whole machine is running on a Pentium 3, 800 megahertz with 512 RAM. So the front end can be a little bit slow.
So everything, the database, the back end, the front end?
The front end, the back end, the database, one agent, plus a web server and a whole lot of other stuff for testing was all thrown on this poor P3800. And it monitors almost 200 clients. If we actually scroll down here, it is currently monitoring zabbix servers running, yes. We can set up a secondary value for if the database or the server runs. There's a default script that can send out an email or a text message or something that says, hey, something went horribly wrong. Number of hosts, we've got 200, that's more hosts than I thought. Oh, we got 173 actively monitored hosts right now. We got 14 that are disabled, and we got 52 that are standing in limbo because they're probably tests that I haven't finished configuring yet. Number of items that are currently being monitored. So currently it's monitoring 738, I think that's an 8. Yep. Individual items. So it's monitoring, an item is how much hard drive space does it have, how much memory is in use, processor utilization, is the web server up, is Apache up. Number of triggers, 444, that's things that happen. Number of users that are online. I don't know why there's 3 online, there should only be 2, but that's okay. Performance. Right now my SQL database has to be able to take 20.8559 changes a second. The poor hard drives in this machine are non-stop, just hitting. So but if we look here at the top, we have different groups. Everything can be categorized into a different group. So these are some of the groups that I've just set up. I've got the DNS registers, so if suddenly one of the DNS names is name host is being attacked and is no longer responding, this will trigger an alert here. So suddenly we start getting 25 phone calls from clients that their systems are no longer accessible. We look here and we find out, oh, they're all on the same DNS host. Somebody's being hammered. Again, we also have all the different ISPs that are local. It's very common. Arrival's been a real pain in the butt this week, where we'll just see 25 clients go offline like this, but then they're all rival. Every one of them just goes offline, the whole ISP goes down. Various different groups we have there.
And if a rival's watching this,
We are sorry.
we're sorry.
What?
Nothing.
Oh, Arrival? Yes, we apologize, Arrival. But you did cause problems this week. Last 20 issues will be shown right here. Right now, it looks like there's one of the major backbones in the United States is having problems right now. Normally, for a local company, that's not a problem, but we like to keep track of that stuff, so.
Did you import
Kinda knows what's
those
going on.
backbone routers?
There's a backbone runners, yeah.
Did you import them from
Yeah.
someone else?
Yeah, I did. Internet Health, Internet Health something. It's an organization that monitors the health of the internet and pulls down all this information. So
Well, that's cool.
I copied their website, turned it into a CSV, and imported the CSV into zabbix. Zabbix lets you import all your information into a CSV. So if you're importing 200 clients at once, that can take a long time to do manually.
Can you export to CSV also?
You can't, actually, no, you can't export to CSV, but you can export it to XML.
Okay.
And then
Then do it from
you
there.
can do it from there. So we have that. That just gives you a basic dashboard. I actually never look at the dashboard. We have the overview, which is extremely large. And if I actually load this right now, I will trigger a processor overload alert on this server because it takes so much to generate all the images on this screen. Because we have so many, it's launching image magic to actually, these are actually all pictures right here to get them to rotate for all the different clients. So it's launching a bunch of threads,
Wow.
creating the images right now. Now if I just, this will actually stay cached for the entire session, so the next time I view this screen, it's not going to have to render these, but we might as well just let this go because
So you need some ponies for that.
you need some ponies for this, especially if you want to view everything all at once. But here's some of the things that it is monitoring. It's making sure that the password files have been changed, the services, various critical files on different hosts. We can monitor DNS, SMTP. We have power failure. We have various APCs that are being monitored. I mean, there's just a whole long list of different things that are being monitored.
And those are all delivered alerts?
Sorry?
Those are all delivered alerts?
I'm sorry?
Those are all delivered monitors and alerts there?
Yes, yes, they are. These are all built into the application. There's a dozen or so here of special ones which I put in, like our outside temperature, server room humidity, server room fan disable. We have a baffle system now in our server room where it will actually, with filters on it, but it will actually determine whether it should be pulling in fresh air or it should be pulling on air conditioner based on the temperatures inside and out, and it also takes humidity into control its
Consideration.
factor in, because if it's extremely high humidity outside, we're not going to want to bring wet air into a server room, which unfortunately a couple months ago the system wasn't taking that into effect, and it's raining outside and it's sucking in air from the outside, and we end up having our servers go down because there's corrosion on the PCI cards. So, an overview, obviously you need a very large monitor if you want to see this. I really don't, it's too much information to look at, and in reality, you don't really need to know who's up. All you really need to know is who's down. So we can just have the triggers here. Give my poor CPU a chance here to catch up. And this will just show us, depending on who's selected host-wise, problems within the system. So currently, We'll give it a second to update here.
All this is interacting with the database?
Is all interacting with the database. These are all the problems that the system finds. The severity, based on what you want to do. See, I told you, as soon as I open this, I'm going to get a processor too high on zabbix server. These are the same server, they're just a mirror of each other. So these are considered average. They are logged and they're monitored, but they're not going to trigger an alert because I'd be getting a beeping phone all day long. Severity, this one here, I don't want to be alerted anyway. The system has decided that the server room temperature is too high. It is not out of range, so it's kicked on additional fans. So this is just information. But this is everything that's outside of the desired happy level. So what we can do is I'll go ahead and we'll go to configuration here and hosts. We'll set up hosts.
I had a question also regarding the triggers, like on this product, can you, I know in Nagios you can do like, trigger when host is down, trigger when host is up, trigger on warnings, falls within that. But you can also set to where if it does go down, that every, seventh check after it goes down, the first initial alert, you can have a delay. If the status is a change, it won't keep alerting you.
Correct. It's, well, there's two different ways that you can set this up. One, you can have do a single alert, which it will send an alert when something is out of range. You can set a option that is recovery, so it will alert you when it goes out of range, and it will alert you when it's back in range. So that's the simplest alert right now. Something went down, something went back up. You can also set an escalation level. And you can set different steps for that. So if mail server A it goes offline and is offline for 5 minutes without either it going back online or somebody acknowledging the problem, then send the alert again. If that doesn't go, then you can have it send an alert to somebody else. So you can create a whole escalation team. And it was just fixed with the last version here. But there was the previous version of this, there was an ugly bug in the escalation routine where if it went through, the way it's supposed to work is if it takes 15 times for somebody to be notified that a server is down, for it to actually be fixed, and it is fixed, it will send a notification out to everybody that it notified that the problem has been solved. So if it contacted 10 separate people, through its escalation table, it will return that message to all 10 people that it has been solved. But the bug was, it remembers the escalation steps, but when it sent the recovery step, if it took 15 steps to get to that recovery step, it sent out 15 recovery messages to everybody. So everybody would get 15 text messages. But supposedly that's been solved. We had a night where the power went out and we had about 50 or so notifications because the power was out, and when the power came back on, nobody could sleep because our phones kept beeping every 60 seconds. It's back up. It's back up. So we'll go ahead and create a new host. This is how you create a host. We give it a name. So we'll go ahead and say, okay, we want to actually, let's just monitor Google, because Google is relatively unstable and needs monitoring. Over here, we will choose the different groups. Now, these are groups that we can categorize. So if we want to run reports or sort different clients together, we can do that. We group them by ISP. We group them by whether they are a paying client or a non-paying client. Paying clients tend to get a little quicker answering. I have two groups in here, known flappers. A flapper is a server that is always going up and down. Any of the clients that we have that are on a wireless connection, the connection is not really stable, and all day long we get false positives that the server's down because their wireless connection is not extremely stable. So if that is one of those clients, I have a group here called Known Flappers, and if the host is in that particular group, it is told to wait twice the length of time normally that would trigger an alert. So if a server is required to be down for 5 minutes before we are notified of it, if it's a known flapper, it's going to be 10 minutes. If we were normally don't want to see it for 60 seconds, it's going to wait 2 minutes. So just to kind of lower false positives. We have a green board as well up on the wall, which rotates through critical failures. If we want to monitor something, but we don't want it ever to show up on that board, I have a group that says no green board, and it won't go there. So we'll go ahead and name it. We can either monitor them by DNS name or the IP. One thing that will really mess you up if you're not paying attention is if you put an IP in here but you don't actually select IP, nothing will get monitored. It will never fail out, it will never cause a trigger, nothing will happen, and you will never know something's gone wrong. So I don't know if this has been fixed in the newest version, but it is something you do just want to remember to make sure that you are going by. So
You'd think it'd do some input checking, huh?
yeah, it's PHP, so if I wanted, I can go in there and fix the status. We can put something in here, set it up ahead of time, and say not monitored, where it'll be in there and nothing's been done to it. We can set it to monitored either. If we've set up different proxies, all the proxies that we set up, we can say client A proxy is this machine is behind that proxy, so we can select that. We can set various different types of extra information in here. I have not used any of this stuff. I don't really care. Contact information, who to contact if something goes down, software that's installed on their hardware, MAC address, all this information. We're going to just none of this right now. We're going as simple as possible. Now the templates is where we come down to the nitty-gritty. It has a whole list of templates that are in here already for hardware that it automatically knows what to do. It'll set up for an APC battery, it already knows what to do for that. For MySQL, various different types of routing equipment and servers. We have some very basics. Template for Linux, Mac OS X, NetWare, a whole bunch of different templates built in.
OpenBSD, huh?
Yep.
Oh.
Tomcat. Standalone. Standalone is a basic template that monitors just ports. It's monitoring, is the mail port open? Is the HTTP port open? The only problem with this template right off the bat is it will monitor that for the entire host. And not every host has a mail server, a web server, all this stuff. So I actually created a whole bunch of templates, kind of break them down. So we can go ahead and say, mail access. Does the server have a mail server? Does the mail server accept SSL connections? Yes. Actually, I'm sorry. Mail access is POP and IMAP, not sending mail. So does it accept POP or IMAP over SSL? MTA, this will check to make sure that it is receiving mail properly. We can ping it. Standard ping, this particular template pings every 2 minutes. Fast ping every 60 seconds. Quality of service ping is quite annoying. It will ping it every 10 seconds. Does it have terminal services up and running? A web server running SSL. So we'll go ahead and just select these. We'll see if Google has both mail service, POP and IMAP open, POP and IMAP over SSL. Can they receive mail? We'll ping them. We'll make sure that their Microsoft Remote Desktop, their terminal services is running, and their web server is running.
I think Google only has IMAP-S open. That's it.
Hopefully these won't accept as valid connection. So I'll go ahead and save this, And that's adding a client to the monitoring list. So if we go here to monitoring, and we can go to latest data, and let's find a host that we just put in
When you
here.
selected it, you just selected not monitored.
Did I? Let's find Google in here. Google. Is that the one I said? I didn't do Google name, did I? I did have it as not monitored?
Yeah.
Okay. Then it won't monitor. We'll change that. Right. Now it's monitored.
Mikey's always right.
Go Mikey. Give that tech a donut.
We get a brownie.
Brownie? We can give you a brownie. Come on, P3.
It's a lot of PHP script.
There's a lot of PHP script, yeah. And there we go. All right, now here's what we have here. It's monitored. Gives us the last check time, and although the server is monitoring everything every 120 seconds, no default, the server, when it queues all these checks up, it actually will stagger all of its checks and keep everything staggered, so the server isn't trying to barf out 744 simultaneously checks every 2 seconds. So it will actually skew everything out, so it's just kind of trickling out. In this case, 20 checks a second is actually what it's doing. So right off the bat, we have several services that are up, several services are down, and there's no change because these services have never been run. So Google's is there, it's running. Its web service and its secure web service is up, and www.google.com evidently does not have a mail server, IMAP, or POP3, and thank God it doesn't have terminal services on it. That would worry me. That means Google's running IIS with terminal services open. What we can do is let me go ahead and grab another client here because this will actually be very boring to look at. Let's find that one here. Come back. One of the internet routers here that's currently down. We can actually tell the system, show us the history, and for the last 1 hour, they've been down. It's got a value of 0. Wait, am I volume?
Can you expand the trends?
We can, yeah, we can click here, we can pick how far we want, days, weeks, months, years. Let's go ahead and take a look at the last week. Give it a second. It's pulling all the information for the from the SQL database.
George is bad.
Sorry?
George is bad.
Georgia is bad, yes. Now, it is, this green line right here is the average. The yellow designates that it has not been down this entire time, but for the most part, it has been almost down that entire time. So we can actually go in here and say what is going on during this 14-hour period. And again, for P3, it takes a second. And a second here, it's still thinking. Graph.
What's that graphing tool? Is it using that?
This is built in, yeah. It's
RRD, is it RRD?
No, RD is an engine. Well,
RRD tool, I think,
Yeah, I think it is.
or does it graph?
To me, that doesn't look like it's been down that much, but I guess. Where did I? 14-hour history. This blank area right here means it has no data. And if you were on the fosug website or the IRC the other day, you can tell this is actually where I was doing an upgrade to the zabbix server, and I took it offline, crossing my fingers I didn't destroy my SQL database.
You backed it up first, right?
Yes, I did.
I remember that.
But we can pull up, we can go by graphs, we can bring up individual values. If you've ever dealt with AT&T and trying to explain to them yet the server is down, this has already been great a few times. I've just copied and pasted this into a spreadsheet, resorted it by the downtimes, attached the graph that shows that the service is down, ship it off to the ISP, and then they get it and say, oh, I guess there's a problem. Yes.
I've done that with Time Warner, is after so many hours, they take it off our bill, if we can prove it. And I've done that with Nagios. Makes money.
It does.
Yeah, nothing beats hard data.
Triggers. Triggers, we set up a host. We can now set up triggers for individual clients or for everybody. Right now I have a trigger. This particular one, you have your host, which is the device that you're scanning. Items are the items on that host that you're scanning, whether it be mail, web. Triggers are where you set this took a while for me to figure out how this worked. Triggers are where you set the range of what something happens. So right now, this particular equation in here, this does take a while to learn. The host, the SMTP, the maximum time that has been down is not 1. So this is saying that trigger if the host is not 1, so 1 means that it's up. So if this is anything but 1 for 300 seconds, consider it failed. I don't want to know immediately when a server goes down, because if the server's down for 1 second, which happens all the time, it could be a single lost packet that's gone out there and not come back. The server can be under high strain and it didn't receive or process that up packet. And our green board would look like a bloody mess if it threw up an alert every single time something failed once. So we have actually, it's set for 5 minutes right now. So if a client is down for 5 minutes, we're notified. Actions. This is where we actually set what to do if something goes wrong. Right now, I'm still just learning these. I've only got a few in here. I've got, let's go back here, fan enabled. If the host zabbix server, the trigger server room temperature enabled, so if the trigger has been hit, and the trigger for this particular one says that if the temperature is above, I think like 70 degrees, if the temperature is above 70 degrees, the outside temperature is lower than the inside temperature, the humidity is within an acceptable range, and there's probably some other stuff in there. Start bringing in fresh air into the server room. Otherwise, turn on the air conditioner. So we've got a couple different things here. If for some reason the temperature goes out of range, if humidity for some reason goes out of range or temperature goes out of range, it will actually send a text message to the cell phones of everybody that's in this group. And these right here, this is because I actually have a kind of a workaround. It's kind of cool, but it's only because my SQL query knowledge is seriously lacking and I'm learning. I have a little remote command here that actually just runs a bash script to send the information over to the our green board. It will launch a little bash script with the trigger information, the status, the priority, the group, and all this information. Then my bash script will parse all this out, throw it into an HTML, and throw it up onto our green board. So, any questions on that? Any questions at all?
The bash script is on each machine.
The only bash script is on the server, and it just it gathers all the information. What I really should do is, as I get my more SQL knowledge at PHP, I'm just going to query the SQL database directly, and I'm not going to worry about zabbix throwing out.
And all this is done through the front-end client?
This is all the front-end client right here.
Okay.
Everything is set up through the front-end client.
So there's no SSHing and then running scripts and then logging back out?
It's all done. You actually set up on the server for everything that you need to do. You set up an actual zabbix user. So unless you really need to have an automated script that's running as root, which there's got to be better ways to do that. Everything can be done underneath that zabbix user, so you can kind of contain it. And it's the agent that's running on the server actually is what executes all the code. So you could, any machine that is running an agent, you do have to manually enable the option in the agent because it is disabled by default for security reasons. But you can actually execute remote code on any of the agents. So if I have a Windows server and I need to
Format the hard drive.
format the hard drive. Say restart Exchange on an Exchange server. If this thing says that the server is down, one of the actions can be log into the agent and see if the service is running. If the service isn't running, send a net start command for the Exchange.
You could actually,
You need system privileges for that, so
You
it
do.
does run as
Well,
an administrator on Windows boxes.
Almost, yeah, on a Windows box, the security isn't that locked
so
down.
you could actually have some scripts that would run to actually see if it does some
Yeah.
checks and actually send them to you to say, hey, no, this isn't running, this is running, and then how you can do your diagnostics on the way.
Correct. And
That's kind of cool.
And when it sends an email, you can actually have it gather all that information up and send all that information in your email. So you can create an email template for Exchange down. And before it sends the email, it can actually execute the script, pull the information. It will send, is your hard drive's full? What's the database size of your Exchange database?
Right.
All this information. So you're sitting there at dinner and you look at your phone and it says Exchange down, database size 78 gigabytes, Exchange no longer running, CPU okay, memory okay. Well, it's bigger than Exchange can be.
Yeah.
So it's
Or you could, like, in my case with Exchange, because I don't do secure logging, like, my log size gets a little too full, gets away, and I don't.
You can set the
I can-
directory of
directory
your
where I
logs and
want
have
to.
it report on your log directory as well.
For just a real newbie type question, well, we're a bunch of application guys that are monitoring applications used across a big network. And we've got, I think we're using Hostgraph right now, and we're going to use Cactus pretty soon. But what we can see is, for instance, what the CPU activity is on our database server and our application server. And most of the time that tells us if we've got a problem with an app server that's gone into the loop or an inefficient database query. But every now and then we get these calls from people saying, oh, the system's running really slow. And we don't really know what to look for there. And our, first thing to do is point your finger at the network and say, oh, there's going to be a network problem.
I knew that was coming out.
So,
Point at the network guys, it's their fault.
So I'm asking how can we narrow it down so that we're not pointing our fingers at the network guys unless it's a really big problem.
Well, what you could do is if you have a specific thread, you can watch individual threads or PIDs, depending on whether it's Windows or Linux. You can actually set up a check. So if you know that your application always uses a thread that's named blah, 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 you can actually have a check in there that says, watch this thread. If it utilizes more than X on the CPU for a certain period of time, trigger an alert, or if it uses more than a certain amount of memory for a certain amount of time. Because you don't want to just say if it exceeds 90% CPU utilization, trigger an alert, because anytime an application launches or makes a major change, especially under a Windows environment, it will grab all the CPU for 1 or 2 seconds, and then it'll come back down, but that will trigger an alert. So you want to say, okay, 30 seconds. If this application maintains this high load for 30 seconds, trigger an alert. And you can have on your dashboard, you can have your clients listed, and it will say, okay, client C has for 15 minutes this application has been at 100% CPU utilization and using 95% of the memory. So at that point, you can immediately just say, okay, it's not a network issue. There is something on the server that's eating up.
Flip it around there now. How do you know if it's a network issue?
If you have, if you have network hardware that can be monitored, you can be pulling the network hardware for lost packets or delayed packets, utilization on the switches, stuff like that. So if you have a 3-com managed switch and it tells you utilization on each port, if that goes past a certain range, then you know, okay, for some reason your network's being hit. Or if you're dropping a high number of packets on your network and your switch is capable of monitoring that, that can also be set up as a trigger. So if your switch is dropping 20% of its packets, something's wrong on your network. And you can trigger an alert for that.
So, with those Cisco templates and whatnot, if you were to ask it, you know, I have a Catalyst switch, Cisco Catalyst switch, X model, and there was a template for it. You have something like Cacti, which you can actually see where the high points are, and you know, do trend logging, basically. This is more event logging than trend logging, right? I think that's what you're kind of asking.
Well, you
I'm
can
not
run a
mistaken.
report over a period of time, and you can get a report. I don't know if you can.
So will it actually log the data value every time?
Every time it pulls
Oh,
within the range
okay.
that you do, yeah.
So then you could do
Yeah,
a
you can run a
graph.
report on the entire range. So,
The one question I have is, probably this, maybe phrased it different ways. Because it has the active front end on the client, right, that actually does all the checking and then it reports back to
the front end does nothing. The front end is simply a visual access for you to program it and to.
Well, I'm talking about actually like the active agents that go on each machine that monitor the services. They can run the scripts and the port that runs in that the actual server connects to, or vice versa. But is it work like Nagios where, let's say the server goes down for, it's flapping and you want to check the flap, but let's say it only flapped for maybe 2 minutes, but you have so many hosts that you made your server, it went down in that time frame, but it wasn't checking at that time. Can the client on the machine take the rule set and say, I noticed even when you weren't checking me.
If
that-
you're using the proxy, yes.
If you're using proxy?
If you're using the proxy will hold all of the.
But the proxy doesn't actively check either, or is it just? or
The
is it client?
proxy acts just like the server. It receives everything, and will actually just hold that information until the master server is back online, and then it will dump all that information over to it. Or if something's out of their range, depending on how you have it
So the
configured.
proxy doesn't actually check the client actually responds back to it.
Well, you have active checks and you have passive checks,
Mhm.
which to me is the other way around, but I guess they're looking at it from the client perspective.